Good morning and good evening. Thank you very much for attending the first episode of Innovation for Democracy Café. My name is Ya-wei Chou, and I'm the program manager for Civic Foundation's Global Innovation Hub. The agenda flow will be like this. Firstly, I will invite the two guests to share the experience for 20 minutes in total. And following that, there will be a 20 to 30 minutes discussions. And finally, we will have the Q&A session with the audience. So during the Q&A session, please feel free to type your questions in the Q&A panel. I will read the questions and remind our guests to answer those questions. Now let's start the talk today. So firstly, I would like to introduce about this project, the project called the Innovation for Democracy Café. It is a project started by the Hung-wen Foundation Global Innovation Hub this year. It will be a serial online event that introduces you the best practices from civil society on how to use technology to foster democracy and freedom. We hope that we can learn from the experience to discover the way of how to make technology a helping force to advance democracy. Also, by learning from these examples, we can also learn how to develop technology in the ideal way, how to make technology development be complementary to democracy as well. The reason why we come up with this idea is because we experience and sense the global trend of democracy backsliding. And also, authoritarian regimes are increasingly using technology as a way to control or suppress people's freedom. So that makes us feel that we are in dire need to learn from civil society. And by doing so, we can try to take back the control of technology and make technology as a tool for defending democracy. So today's topic will be surrounding how open data and cooperation with the civic tech community can help to foster the initiative from the civil society. But before we start our talk, I would like to provide some explanation of some key terms. Firstly, maybe you will be puzzled what is open data. So let me give you some simple definitions that will help you to understand the talk later. But I believe the two guests will provide you further ideas about what does those two terms mean. So open data is a term that describes if a set of data is compiled or manufactured or provided by using taxpayers' money or public resources, then the public, the citizens, should have the right to use this data. And the way of releasing data should be easily accessible and easily used by the general public. Please be noted that the data here doesn't mean and doesn't include those data can be associated to personal privacy data. That is not included in the discussions in open data. And the second term, civic tech community, refers to a group of citizens that with technological proficiency and they have the calling to advocate for democracy or other public welfare. And they were very happy to cooperate with people without a technological background. That is how we describe a civic tech community. So later, our two guests will introduce how these two elements become very important to foster democracy and hold our government accountable. Firstly, let me introduce our two guests today. So the first one is the Deputy Secretary General of the Green Citizens Action Alliance, Ms. Hung-wen. Hello, Hung-wen. Nice to meet you today. So Ms. Tseng has been leading the Taobin environmental data visualization website and scan it before buying it app. And all these great projects are based on the use of open data and collaboration with citizens and civic tech community. Hung-wen believes that the transparency and openness are the key of democracy and environmental protection. So later she will introduce her projects to help the audience to get a concrete idea on how open data can inspire creative initiatives and how the goals of open data can really be achieved, and how civic tech community can help to work with the project. So our second guest is Ms. Adriana Groh, and she is now leading the project of New Hanse in the new institute in Germany. And she has also been leading a lot of projects on digital sovereignty, data commons, and public participation. After Hung-wen, she will give us an overview on how to understand data, how to help the citizen to have the capacity to understand data, and when citizens getting more idea about data, how can they how to inspire them and how to help them to spark more ideas to hold the government accountable. And now, so I hope you already have a cup of coffee on your hands. So let's welcome Ms. Tseng to share her project with us. The floor is yours, Hong-wen.
Hello, everyone. Once again, I would like to thank FNF. I would like to thank the organizer for your invitation to share with our friends from around the world to discuss the topic of open data. So here I have a slide I prepared to share with all of you. So I am Tseng Hong-wen from Green Citizens Action Alliance, GCAA. We have been established for over 20 years in Taiwan. For the longest time, we have paid attention to environmental pollution issues, to nuclear power plant phase out topics. In recent years, we have devoted all our energy on the phase out advocacy campaign against nuclear power. We have also poured a lot of efforts into sustainability transition and energy transition. So all our works at GCAA, we follow a very consistent context. Along the path of economic development, different countries take similar pathways. Many of these societies will first focus on economic development and then environmental protection, the so-called brown economy model. We often favor economic growth over environmental protection. Many environmental regulations lag behind. So we see this as a common phenomenon around the world. In 1950s and 1960s, that was the case in Taiwan till present. But now, as we focus on topics like climate change, climate crisis, we start to reflect more on whether to keep on this path or not. And this is why at this phase, we are especially focusing on energy transition and sustainability transition. At this phase, we have come to a consensus. We understand how necessary it is to achieve this transition. But how do we actually make possible this transition? And this is why we have this Taoming footprint project. Usually, these are the two challenges that we face, the two scenarios that we face. Many companies, many enterprises, they understand that transition is important, but they lack the momentum or the impetus to transition into a green economy. Many companies, they are cost-centered. Many companies understand it's important to carry out the transition, but they are hesitant in investing into actual measures and efforts that will make that transition possible. It is very costly and they are hesitant. They worry that if they invest a lot on environmental protection, they won't be able to sustain their revenue. And that's why impetus, motivation is lacking. And that's why we see many companies, they claim that they want to transition to green economy, but they are worried about their own competitiveness, so they are not willing to take actual action. But actually, it's the other way around. Becoming more green will help you become more competitive. The second scenario or challenge that we often observe is that many companies, they face these pollution incidents. Many of the companies, they think that they are working very hard to adhere to environmental standards already. But the affected residents have many complained. The affected residents still protest and say that there's wastewater or there is air pollution. The affected residents are truly affected by the pollution. But for the enterprises, they say that we are working so hard not to violate the laws. And then the government also has another perspective. Under this situation, every side insists on their own point of view and they are not able to communicate with each other. And one major reason is because there's a lack of communication, there's a lack of transparent data. And this is another issue that we hope to tackle.
We've been stuck because there has been a lack of mechanism for dialogue and conversation. So we're thinking whether we can find a way out from this dilemma or ways to move forward. That is how Daobing came into being, because we wanted to start from the point of view of open data. And there are 4 dimensions. The first, open data. With open data, we can move forward to work with different target audience. First of all, from the government's point of view, how do we help them with open data? And also from the corporate point of view, with data, how can we boost CSR and also ESG? We want to move away from the cost mentality into boosting competitiveness. And finally, we wanted to engage the civil society and also to boost their participation. So these are the few paths that we've been thinking about. And what have we done in practice? First of all, open data is not an easy task. It is a long journey. In the past, not all environmental data was available to us. We needed to ask for the data from the government. And once the data becomes open, how do we make use of that data? And environmental data, even though all of it is from the Environmental Protection Administration, however, it may be scattered in different websites under the EPA. So once the data is open, the general public have a difficult time finding it and they have a difficult time working with it or using it. So we wanted to have a way for the data to be integrated onto one website, and all of the data regarding corporations is also included on this website. And this was actually beyond our expectations. It was much more utilized than we imagined. Actually, the general public were highly interested. This was beyond our expectations. So who were the users of our website? There were businesses that looked at their upstream or downstream partners to see if they have records in pollution and whether they can make improvements. And also for financial institutions, if they are providing financing, they need to look into the businesses they work with or have an interest in investing in, whether they have these records. And what was unexpected for us was that before businesses, if they were fined, they would delay in making the payments. However, this is also included or recorded on our website. So that has become, I guess, a motivation for businesses to pay the fines. And the general public would use our website as well. We've heard from certain victims because in the past, this data did not exist. So if they want to look into a business, the only way is to look on the internet for news about a certain business. And if it's not reported in the media, then they wouldn't find out the information. But with this website, they can look into certain factories or how they deal with certain pollutants. So this website, we said that unexpectedly, it's more widely used than we expected. Every month, there would be 100,000 users, and the population of Taiwan is 23 million. So this is actually a very high number. Let me briefly talk about the website and the functions. So aside from integrating data, we made an environmental map. So the blue dots represent factories. So if you see the blue dots together, it means the factories. And also we have indication of the air quality. So people can look at the map to get an idea of the air quality in their surroundings. And also they can have an idea of the real-time pollution of factories. So this is an environmental map. So if you click on the dots, you can look at the businesses from 2010 until today, all of the penalties, the number of times, and also the latest records of violation. So this is a detailed record of the violations of businesses. At the bottom, you can see an explanation of why these violations happen. This took us 1.5 to 2 years to make this data transparent. In the past, we only saw the violations, but not the reasons for the violations. We would know which laws they violated against. However, we wouldn't know the exact reasons. But these records are now open. And because there could be different levels of reasons for violating the law. It could be polluting with wastewater or not handing in certain data on time. So if you can get an idea of why the violation happened, then you could understand the business better. So this is important information. This is a map of companies and businesses. And we worked with civil societies that specialize in technology. So the government has data that is based on factories, but we have data based on specific companies. So that is quite helpful. So after looking at factories, we consolidated to focus on companies. And we can look into whether companies have violations or certain business groups have violations. And with that data, with the database, we thought about how we could engage the general public and to help them use this information. That's why we developed the Scan It Before Buying It app. So all of the violation records that would be integrated with product information. Taiwan doesn't have product databases at the before that. So we would develop the database for products and then combine it with the information that we already have. So with the Scan It Before Buying app, consumers can scan the barcode and they would be able to see the manufacturer of this product, how many violations have they had, and they can get a clear idea. And after we developed the app, a lot of consumers, they wanted a simple answer. They wanted to know, what can I buy and what can I not buy, or what should I not buy? Actually, it's still difficult to meet the needs of the general public. So that's why we compiled further information. You can see the violations of the manufacturer of the product, but also we listed we ranked the amount of violation and also the number of violations. So you can choose from the list those with least violations. Or if you like to dine somewhere, you can look at their past records. So it's not us telling you what you can buy or not buy, but we give you the data for you to decide. So you can scan the barcode of a product and make the comparison. So if you wanted to buy tissues, you could see for the tissue manufacturers who have fewer violations. And then we also have an ESG tester. We call it an ESG tester because we know that just the violation records is not enough. We're talking about carbon reduction, we're talking about ESG, and it's quite complicated. So how do we make data open to all? There's not much data that is open from the government. So ESG data is in ESG reports or CSR reports. So we went through different CSR reports and we compiled this database. We are in our beginning stage because we need to go through a different CSR reports. So if you have smarter ways, maybe you can help us come up with better ways to compile the data. So we are in the process of developing the database for data related to carbon, to the environment, and also to the industry. we look at certain indicators used internationally related to ESG, and we think about how we could make up the gap or to make up for certain indicators that are missing but are needed in Taiwan. And so for this ESG tester, what we like to do is that through the data, we'd like to look at the carbon density for each business, for each company. So we can see that within the same industry, the carbon emission for a specific company, is it at the top or is it at the bottom? How is it doing in terms of emitting carbon dioxide? Is it a carbon intense business? Because there are businesses saying that we've worked really hard, we've made a lot of improvements. However, we want data to be able to back that up. For businesses, they may not know exactly how they fare amongst their peers or counterparts. However, through this database in the future, people will be able to know where they're at compared to their counterparts. And if they're not doing well, they can learn from their peers. So for businesses, they can more precisely invest in places where it matters. And it's not just about cutting carbon emission, it's also related to how businesses deal with waste or how they process water. They can look into how other businesses deal with certain issues. So I think that can effectively help businesses boost their competitiveness. And the second part has to do with green finance, because in green finance, ESG data is also important. Financial institutions do not have ESG data. So in the past, they could only rely on surveys or international rankings. For businesses that made it into the rankings, they probably will invest or provide them with more financing. However, it's difficult for financial institutions to get a granular data. So with this database in place, then financial institutions, when trying to make investments, they can get a better understanding of the businesses that they like to invest in, and also related risks, because risks are involved in investment. And also financial institutions can also select sustainable businesses to invest in. Are these businesses sweatshops, or do they pay attention to the safety of their employees? Before, data was not available. And even until today, we do not have open data in terms of construction or public safety. So with the database in place, this is a good way for financial institutions to avoid risks and also to look into the targets of investment. And for the general public, there are a lot of people that want to invest in certain funds, and they choose ESG related funds. However, what are ESG funds investing in, and whether these businesses are really legitimate, there is no data. So on the PowerPoint, you can see that here we've listed what businesses ESG funds are investing in. So in the future, we can look into these businesses to see if they're sweatshops or if they have very high emission. So it is a way for people to choose financial products based on sustainability. So this is a way for the general public to be involved when it comes to ESG. And I think this is a way to boost ESG situations on the whole or across the board. So that is my presentation.
We really learned a lot from you. So next, let's welcome Ms. Adriana Groh. So she will introduce us what is data commons and how to help citizens have more understanding about that. Now the floor is yours, Adriana.
Thank you very much. Also, thank you for the invitation and thank you for the input. I was listening in closely and I also learned a lot. That was really great. I unfortunately didn't bring a presentation because when I'm talking about open data, data commons, civic tech, digital democracy, I really have to tap in a variety of projects that I ran or that I'm running right now. So I try to not be all over the place and stick to my 10 minutes, so I'm not losing you halfway through my presentation. So I'm taking you with me on that little journey. That is my personal journey. I have a background in public policy and governance, so I'm not a technologist. But when thinking about democracy, and not specifically digital democracy, but just democracy in general, I felt that we have a massive potential in using technology as a tool, understanding open data more like available information, which is crucial lifeblood for a healthy democracy. So when I thought about this, I came up with my own civic tech project for an election in Germany in 2017. Recently redid the whole project for the elections in 2021. And there was a true civic tech project by heart about citizens and elected representatives and communication, making good choices when you do your most democratic right, which is voting. So that was how I got started in this civic tech field, and that's what led me to the Open Knowledge Foundation in Germany, which is working at the intersections of society, politics, and technology. I used to run 2 projects there. One is the Prototype Fund, and one is called the network called Code for Germany. What we really try to do is supporting people in their democratic rights by using technology and open data. And that means you need to build structures, because you can't do it all yourself. Like as one person, I can only do one project. But if you set up something like a fund, or like the Prototype Fund, or a network like Code for Germany, then you multiply your efforts and you connect people, and you really harvest all the possibilities that come with using civic tech or using open data for the democratic good. So we supported and saw many projects similar to what I just heard, like a barcode scanner, to really, like we did really the same thing, to really make informed choices when you go grocery shopping, because maybe you don't want to buy the products that harm the rainforest, or the ones that are the most environmentally unfriendly ones. We also supported projects that gather data on femicides, so how many women die each year because they are killed by their partner, ex-partner, some relative, mostly men. So by making this data available, by supporting people doing this, like civic activists, by supporting good civic tech projects, we aim at 2 things: to help people individually to make informed choices, to educate themselves, to learn, because knowledge is now available that former hadn't been available. So it's now open data, or open data that was available, but it wasn't understandable for people who are not technologists or not data scientists, now is presented in a way that it is really public. And the other thing is not just individual action, but political action. By opening up information or making information more understandable for a bigger group of people, there's more political pressure, and there's more policy action that is more likely to follow, because information is now out there. People react to it, people change their individual behavior, or people go and protest, or people go and vote differently. So there's this really close connection between opening up information, making it available as open data, but also empowering people to use this open data in a way that it spreads, and it's not just there sitting on some server, but it's also used, it's running into projects, it's part of the discussion in civil society. This is how we understand kind of like providing the networks and the infrastructure to think about digital democracy and open data and to make it really impactful. So this is what I've been doing for the last 4 years. The new project, and I don't have any slides on that because it is not there yet. It's just thoughts and prototypes and ideas. We're building it right at the moment. So I'm sharing a very early stage with you here, and I'm really curious to hear your questions. The new project is also about thinking about infrastructure, understanding data as infrastructure, and how we need to change the structures in our cities in a way, in the city ecosystem in a way that we have a more empowered civil society, we have a more transparency, more accountability at the policymaking level, but also we have more innovative and more competitiveness between the different businesses and services that are running in the city or run by the city. This program is about to be set up together with the city of Hamburg in Germany. It's a city that is pretty advanced in their digitalization strategies, which is unfortunately not the case for all cities in Germany. But this city of Hamburg, they are already doing a lot, and they have something called a transparency law that is making it mandatory for the city of Hamburg to share all their information that is not private as open data with the city of Hamburg and all the companies and the citizens. So there's an open data portal that is run by the city where you can just go and get all the data sets that you want and need. So that is great. But now there's the question, what about the data from the companies? What about citizen-generated data? You maybe also want this as open data. You maybe want something that we call a data commons. And when I say this, I just mean a framework that has legal, technical, and political rules where all data that is of interest, mobility data, environmental data, and so on, made open and available to everyone who agrees to use this data commons under the rules that are implied. So fair, transparent rules for everyone that wants to use it. This doesn't really exist yet, according to our research, at least in Europe. We have some similar frameworks for medical data, but understanding the city as an ecosystem where we just by default say data about mobility and environment and so on is open and provided not as a product, but as a common, like as infrastructure that is available for better services, more accountability, better planning of new districts, on involvement of the citizens in the services that the city provides and vice versa. So this is something that we imagine to be a structure that we really wish for the future. The digital twin of our cities, where we have the means to just, co-create, communicate, deliberate about the things that happen in our very real life as citizens. That is something we really wish for, as I said, and we hope we can start with the nucleus of a city to test this as a prototype, have our learnings, share them with others, and then see how we can copy it in other cities, how we can scale up, and how we can make this a future vision for how open data is the default, how civic technology and cities are in a very fruitful relationship, and how this is how we understand democracy in the future. So not just digital democracy, just democracy with some digital tools, and not just open data, but information that is available for everyone, not just technologists, but also every citizen that wants to understand what is going on and how can I become part of this, or how can I join the conversation. So I've spoken 10 minutes already. I hope you could follow along, and I'm really happy to start a discussion now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Adriana. That's a wonderful sharing. I'm really excited to learn that how you make open data a default setting in all the infrastructures of the city. I learned a lot from all of you. So, but now I want to lead the audience to dive deeper to your experience. So I will ask some questions to help the audience to know more about from you. So firstly, I will have a question for Hung-wen. You mentioned that in your articles for Nauman Foundation introducing your projects, you mentioned that the Town Big Footprint website is not just a website. It's a unprecedented environmental movement based on open data that has never been seen in Taiwan. So, well, that means the use of open data did make some difference. Can you please tell us, compared to the previous environmental movement or campaign, when we focus on the approach of data, or we make the data release in a way that meet the criteria of open data, what is the specific difference being made? What kind of difference may be made?
To answer this question, with the support of open data, what is the difference? So here we need to go back and ask, without open data, what is the existing situation? Like we mentioned, there's these challenges and difficulties that we face without open data. There's a lack of government accountability. So without open data, we face these challenges. There's a lack of trust between the government and the civic society. There's a lack of government accountability. But now, with the support of open data, we are able to open up trusting dialogues with the government, with the companies. Secondly, we are able to hold companies accountable. In the past, without open data, it's hard for us to actually see what the companies are doing. For example, carbon emission or ESG efforts or green financing. Are they actually achieved? We're not able to see, but now with open data, we are able to see the actual achievements. We are able to hold them accountable.
So we've been talking about net carbon zero for 2050. To Taiwan, I would say 70% of the emission comes from businesses. And we've been talking about how different industries need to cut emission or to curb emission. And then if that trickles down to individual businesses, how much emission do they need to curb? That can be calculated. And businesses do make pledges. However, we don't have the data to really see what they're actually doing. Are they walking the walk? Are they putting action to their words? So with data, I think we can look at long-term, midterm, and short-term goals and to measure that against what they are doing, or else they wouldn't be able to meet their goals for 2030. So it's not just about whether businesses want to make the transition. It's also about the next generation. What kind of a world do we want to leave to them? There is no turning back when we think about curbing greenhouse gas. So without the data, which is the case right now, how are businesses doing in terms of curbing emission? We don't know. And the third part is that if these businesses cannot be transparent, then stakeholders cannot be involved in the process. So with data, change happening because stakeholders can come in to take action. So only by having data available can we have businesses and the government talk to each other and look at what businesses or how they are doing and to have them shoulder their responsibilities and also to have more people become involved in this process so that we can boost the sustainability of a democratic country or society.
Thank you for your reply. I think that really gives us another lesson that how open data can bring real change. So following Hong-wen's reply, I have a similar question to Adriana. So, Adriana, your project highlighted that the importance to help people to develop the capacity to understand data. So, from your observation for advocates or for just for general citizens, after they can have more approach to get the knowledge about data, or they are allowed to approach more data, what kind of difference that they can make to their cause or to their advocacy, or what it can help them to make government accountable?
Thank you. I like the saying that goes, what you measure is what you get, which basically just says you cannot know what you don't know. This idea of making information available by default. So especially if you're the state, publishing your information as open data by default in formats that are also machine readable, but also approachable for journalists or just interested citizens, is how we need to understand democracy in the 21st century. So that's just a basic requirement. And if that is not a given, we have a lack of democracy, in my opinion. And what it changes is that we foster and support learning. First and foremost, we help everyone that is part of society to make informed decisions. That doesn't mean that people actually learn or everyone actually learns, but you provide the baseline, so to say, that this is actually possible, which is a good start. What we then need, I think, is supporting the capacity of people to work with that available information with open data. Because if you just have open data lying around, unfortunately, that often it doesn't make a difference if there's not a group of citizens or like an NGO or even a company that makes active use of it. Like it improves a service that they offer so that it is more environmentally friendly, for example. Or a group of citizens that uses the open data to make a map for other citizens that need a wheelchair or that are pushing a stroller or that are using their bike, so they can have a personalized map that helps them to get around in the city way better, or in like the villages around the city, or so on. So, you know, it always needs this two-step approach: making information available, open data by default, and then supporting in many ways, financially, by education, by, you know, by institutions that support the capacities of individuals, of groups to make use of that. And only if you have both, you have some impact. And if one or the other is missing, you have no impact. So also, if you have the institutions, if you have the NGOs that want to do good stuff, but they don't have the open data, nothing happens. If you have open data, but you don't have people who use it to do great magic tricks with it, nothing happens. So we really need to think about as a chain of things that need to link. And if we do that, then good things can happen. If we don't do that, then we can tick some boxes. That's what happens, unfortunately, quite often in Germany. People are like, yeah, but the data is open, but that's not enough. You have to make it not just open, but available. I hope this answers your question.
Well, thank you very much, Adriana. I really like that you emphasize that the work is just not a make data open. There has to be a comprehensive and holistic measures that also emphasize the infrastructure side and making the users capable of using those data. Well, that's very, very helpful lesson. So, well, following your questions, you just mentioned the data should be easily accessible or easily be used. So I will have a question to Hung-wen. From your experience, how to make data really open? I mean, for example, does the government only need to publish its data on its website, then we can call it open data? Does that make us satisfied with the government? And if we're not satisfied with that, how can civil society push the government to really achieve the standard of open data?
Open data, what the government does very often is to put data people want on the line. That is data that you can search, but it's not open data yet. I think the two are different. data that is searchable and data that is open. The biggest difference is whether you can apply the data to more usage. A lot of the programs that we are doing, the government will say that, yeah, all of the data is on the internet, on the website. Let's not think about the quality of the data yet. The government saying, I have the data on our website. That is different from open data, because if data cannot be applied and used by more people, then we don't have the possibilities. Let's take the violation data as an example. We do have the data of corporate violations on the EPA's website. However, there has never been a company that has been changed because that data is available. However, on the Daobing website, because people use that data, so businesses are changing. We get calls from businesses saying that, why did you put our data on the internet? And I asked them, well, this data was available on the EPA's website before. What difference does it make? And they tell us that, well, because our vendors or our clients, they are looking at the website and they don't want to place an order anymore with us. And I think that's quite interesting, because on the government's website, the data doesn't really make any difference. But on our website, it's quite different. And if we can apply that data more, for example, with a scan before you buy, or with the ESG database, the same data, if we can maximize its usage to create influence, I think the key has to do with whether data is really applied or not. And I like to add, when it comes to open data, in China, they do have open data. Actually, in the beginning, when Daobing was established, it was around 2015, when I was working with counterparts in China. They actually are pretty fast when it comes to open data related to the environment. So compared to China, Taiwan actually was lagging behind at the time. However, I don't think demands of the Chinese general public was met. Whether the data was verifiable was also a question in China. But the data, if it's in Taiwan, what is very precious is that it can really be used to hold the government accountable. People can use that data to look at the loopholes of the government in regulating businesses. So if we can use the data to make up for the loopholes of environmental regulations, that would be quite helpful. And this is not the case in China. So for data to be valuable, it should be applicable for the general public. In the past, people didn't look at this data. Financial institutions didn't look at this data. Only by having people use it will it become valuable. And it is used to help us think about whether we can refine our regulations, or whether we can better manage the way we manage factories, and to look at areas of improvement. I think these are all examples of how we can better apply open data.
Thank you, Hung-wen, for pointing out important elements and standards about how to really make data open. So following your replies, I will also have a question for Adriana. So from your experience, like the questions we asked Hong-wen, is obviously open data is not just about asking the government to upload all the data on the website. So from your experience, from the side of the government, when the government release a set of data, what government can do to further help the public to easily understand and use the data? For example, perhaps they need to put the attached file stating, explaining how to use the data, or they have to improve the format they release, or maybe they need provide more education to the people. So what is your idea?
Yes, I think unfortunately we need a mix of many things in order to improve the use of open data. So given that the government would already publish everything that it can publish in the perfect way as open data, then we would still need, for instance, education and training, how to use that open data as a non-technical person, if you ask me. So when we learn how to look for the right sources to back up a claim, like doing research and checking for which source is trustable, which is not. This is a very crucial skill, and lots of people and learn it already. If they are lucky and they go to university, then you have courses on that. I think we should also emphasize this more in school, like pupil education as well. So from an early age on, to go and check for the right sources and so on. I think we should also have this training for not just checking books and newspapers and articles, but also checking data sets. You know, how do I understand a data set? How can I use it? You know, there are simple tools how to analyze a data set. Of course, there are also more complex ones, but like a basic tool set could be available for everyone to just do some basic calculations, to see some correlations, okay, and some causalities maybe as well. But this is something I think we should really focus on our education side. But then also, and this is even more complicated, there needs to be a trusting relationship, I think, because trust is like the very baseline on which every exchange, every communication between each and every one of us works, but especially between governments and civil society. And trust isn't something that just appears in thin air. Trust is something that you need to work for and work on continuously. So a good start for a trusting relationship is transparency, accountability, opening up data sets and information. You know, this is all needs to come from the state side. And then a good idea for this relationship coming from citizens is to seek out to work together in some aspects with your government, because you can actually also learn a lot from each other. I saw that in every project that I was running, which always had this link between civil society and activists, but also governments, that when you manage to bring them together by working on something concrete, one issue, you not only improve that very concrete issue, the goal of your project, but as like a meta effect, citizens and governments, they understand each other better. They find common language. They see that if they learn how to understand each other, then the working together works way better, and you can make much more progress than if you don't have this conversation. So I would suggest education and more programs that bring civil society and governments together. That doesn't mean we don't need the activist kind of projects that are contouring states, that are challenging governments, that are not working together with administration. We need those too, but we also need the ones where you reach out and you work from the inside and the outside together on a joint problem. And that is how we really improve the trust. And that is how I imagine we make more use of open data as well, because we have this trusting relationship and we have the education.
Thank you, Adriana. I think your experience echoes Hung-wen's experience a lot, and I think Hung-wen will already understand and feel what you are talking, because that's also Hung-wen shared with us when she pushed for the project of Taobing website. So you mentioned a very important point, that is to invite and include everybody, work together after data is provided. So I would like to ask Hung-wen, you also mentioned that in your projects, including Taobing website and Scan It Before Buying It app, a very important part to make the project successful is the two projects are able to bring the public to work together. For example, people can upload the data to the Scan It Before Buying It app. So can you please share with us how you design the workflow, how you organize and distribute all the works to make people without technological backgrounds and people with technology capacity to, especially the civic tech communities, how do you make different people like work together?
I would like to first respond to something that Adriana brought up. You talked about how the civic society can hold the government accountable. We have to also understand what are the reservations of the government. The government, they are afraid, and that's why they're not able to disclose the data. What is the reason of behind their fear? Maybe because they are worried that the civic society will be criticizing certain flaws of the government. And that's why we need to really communicate with the government. We need to assure the government that when we open the information, when we open the data, we're not trying to pick on you. We're not trying to criticize you or criticize the companies. We are here to find solutions with you. Without the information, without the transparent data, we will see that there's going to be a lot of conflicts between the civic society and the government. But now with the information opened, we are able to make everything more transparent. Everyone is responsible, not just the government is responsible, the civil society is also responsible. And also with open data, we're able to come together for shared solutions. In the past, this trusting relationship that Adriana mentioned, many government entities, they worry about opening up the data. And when we first started to have these violation records on the website, we found that one of the companies who had these illegal emission, but they were not fined, we did not go to the government to criticize why they didn't fine the company. We didn't criticize the company either. We tried to identify certain flaws in the system. We wanted to identify the loopholes. Some of the loopholes, it requires revising the law, revising the bill to close the loophole. There's a lot of lobbyists, there's a lot of interest groups. But when we made that incident possible and open, we were able to work with the government to close that loophole. It was a loophole that the government was already aware of, but the government wasn't able to close the loophole because there were a lot of pressure from outside. But then with open data, with that cooperation, the government realized that we are standing side by side. We are solving the environmental problems together. We are here looking for better solutions together. And that was a really encouraging example. Later on, when we worked with the EPA, with the Environmental Protection Administration, we already have this trust as a foundation, and we were able to work more smoothly together. So back to the question from Ya-wei about a good working flow so that the tech communities and the citizens can work better together. To be honest, for us as an organization, none of us are tech people, but the website, Taobing footprint website, or for all the projects, there's the technology component. So we had to work closely with the civic tech communities. For a lot of the monitoring information, the monitoring data are available from the government side, but we really relied on the civic tech communities to crawl the data, to bring it over to our website. Indeed, in the initial stage, we worked closely with the civic tech communities. We worked with a lot of program developers to make possible the websites. We also participated in these hackathons. So what is the entire workflow? It's actually a constant learning process. It takes constant revision. First of all, we need to identify the issue at hand. What are we trying to handle? What are we trying to tackle? What's the problem that we have identified? So first, we then have to identify the type of information needed. Once we identify the type of data we need to clean up the data. Some of the data are available on the government website, but very often the data is messy. So we need to clean up the data. Once we clean up the data, we need to merge the data sets. For example, we talked about information from the companies, violation records, factory data. All these data are not interrelated. So we need to somehow merge the data sets. We also need to work a lot with the civic tech communities. For example, company IDs. Company IDs and factory numbers, how do we match those together? It takes a lot of efforts to merge data. We have all kinds of different data sets. For example, when we investigated the illegal plants factories on the agricultural land, we need to create these special maps. But again, it goes back to the clear goal of the campaign. We need to understand the problem that we're trying to identify, and then we know the resources that we need. Do we need engineers? Do we need designers? The one key component is that we need a staff member who is able to communicate with different communities. Sometimes the engineers, they have a very particular language. It's hard to understand. Sometimes on the campaign side, we talk about these advocacy issues. It's hard to really build that dialogue. And it's important to have somebody in between who is able to interpret, to translate these different ways of communication. That's another key component.
Answer these questions and provide us very much, many ideas about how to make more people join in such a good project. So finally, I still have a question for Adriana. So following Hung-wen's replies, if someday an NGO workers or advocates come to you saying that they also want to apply open data to their projects. They also want to initiate a project based on open data, but they have a question like they have a huge sum of data, but they don't know what to do. Then what will be the first 2 tips that you want to share with them?
To your question, when I said, let's not think and talk about digital democracy, but just democracy. Let's maybe not think about open data. Let's think about available information, because sometimes we lose many people because they're like, oh, I'm not a technical person, so I don't know about data. But it's just information, available information that you can use and apply in different ways. If somebody would reach out to me and say, oh, we have this information here and we want to do something with it, I would really advise them to be stepping back and be like, what is the problem? What is something that we want to improve? What is a societal need? What is the issue that is critical for many people? Then define your problem. That is the most important task for everyone who wants to have an impact, to really define the problem. And maybe you need 3 months just thinking about what is the problem. When you are sure that you really understood the problem, then you think about how you're going to solve it. And in many cases, nowadays, that means you need open data, because you need to learn more. You need to find a good solution. You need to measure. You need to track, and all of those things. But this is only the second step. And the first is, don't start from the technology. Don't even start from the data. Start from the issue. And it's going to probably lead you to tech and data and using that and making the most out of it. Of course, when we discuss the problem of no open data available itself, then this is the problem. Then we think about the data and how to make it more open and more available and more views and so on. But in any other case, define your problem first, then find the data sets that you need to work on your problem, to better understand your problem. And that's how you really have impact on the long run. That would be my reply.
Thank you, Adriana. I think your answer will ease a lot of NGO workers' worries, and it's really okay that you don't understand technical issue. You just need to focus on the questions of you, the problems that you're going to tackle, then you will figure out how to work. Yeah. So thank you very much. So now we are approached to our Q&A session, and I see a lot of questions. So I will do my best to ask the guests to reply then. So let me start with the question from Ning. She said that she wants to ask Hung-wen. She is from her experience, she's finding data from the Council of Agriculture, but she found there is a mistake on data. The data she found from one system doesn't match the similar data on another system. She wants to ask Hong-wen whether you encountered problems such as this about the accuracy of data.
I think that may be an individual case. It differs case by case. But I think these are problems that happen for very simple data, like the one that you are looking at. Actually, it's just a record. It's not actually data. And if open data and if data that we can search online are different, I think these are issues that sometimes happen. So I think it differs case by case. You need to find a way to verify and also to get in touch with the Council of Agriculture about the quality of their data. Thank you, Hong-wen.
Ning also has a question. I think that's for Adriana. Ning wonders in Germany how citizens and NGO negotiate with German government to make data open, and how is that compared to Taiwanese government? So I think let's invite Adriana to answer this question.
Yeah, I can start. So the civic tech community, and I think civil society often is very decentralized. So there's not that one person that can negotiate on behalf of everyone. And also for governments, it's sometimes not that easy to know who to talk to when they want to cooperate or so on. So what we need is many individuals who actually only work as translators, lobbyists, kind of like an API as a person, like, you know, this kind of like interlink. And they don't need to be an expert for open data per se, or like a techie, and they don't need to be like a policy person, but they need to understand both languages. They need to be so familiar with both groups that they can translate, because so often both sides want the same thing. Sometimes not, but sometimes it's really like, we want the same thing, but we don't understand your approach and we don't understand your approach. So you need somebody who's kind of like running between the different parties and trying to bring them onto what, like at one table and translate. So I think this is a crucial function. We need to be those people, or we need to support those people, and hope that this helps. I think the difference is in Germany, you don't have that many people inside government who are really understanding of the civic tech community, of the open data movement, who are really open to using more citizen-led initiatives. You know, you could also just pick up some open source tool that is provided by citizens and make that of use for the government. You don't always have to do your own thing. You can really cooperate. We have some of those people, but only a few, and they have a really hard time. And when I look at Taiwan, I'm like in awe how many of your civil servants, as it seems to me, are more open to work together with civic activists or hackers. But that's maybe just my impression. But I really hope that in Germany we would have more people on the government side that are this kind of lobbyist and translator person for the connection of our crowds.
Thank you very much, Adriana. I like that you mentioned that maybe we need to help the civil servants to have the opportunity to learn more about what is civic tech, what is open data. That is very important. So the next two questions, I will pick up the yeah. There's a question from Lulu. She asked that in Taiwan, the Executive Yuan has released the Open Government National Action Plan. There's a one promised in the action plan that from the Ministry of Environmental Protections is to they promise to disclose environmental information. So she wants to know whether this promise is related to the private database, the database initiated by civil society, whether they consult with you or whether they have make this database as a reference.
This is similar to what Adriana said. We need to help the government. Maybe the government thinks that they are opening data. However, the data that they offer is not what the civil society wants. So we need to push the government to open up more data. And when it comes to open data, a lot of the times government agencies, they will open the data they have or the documents they have. However, from an issues perspective, if we're trying to solve an issue and there's data that we need but isn't available, we need to talk to the government to let them know why the general public are concerned about an issue and what kind of data we need. So for open government, I can't say that it's not a useful project. The EPA, compared to other agencies, they work with the civil society the most. So in terms of open data, I think they are taking the lead. However, let me take an example of public construction safety. That's quite important, right? And whether a business had fires or explosions happen, there is no data available in regards to that issue. The government tells us that if there's been an accident, then they will have the data. However, it's not the data that we want. So I feel like open government action initiative, it is, I think, a good idea. At the same time, can it really meet the needs of the civil society? I think is still a question. So we need to communicate to the government, what is it that we really need for this kind of program to work well? Thank you.
So next questions, I think I would like invite Adriana to answer. So we have a question from Ibrahim Johari. He has worked on projects related to open data and leading a project with FNF on make electoral data open and easily accessible. He wants to know whether anybody knows is there any resource internationally are available for support corporations on open data? So maybe Adriana, you can just share what you know.
This is a problem, not the question, of course, but this thing that you only want to work on your project because you care for a problem, you want to solve it, you want to improve things, but then what you have to do is go look for who's going to help you doing that for ages. I would really hope that funders and supporters would it would be the other way around. Like we reach out to you and say, let us help you, and not that individuals have to go and look around. It takes up so much time, so much energy. So I'm really feeling the issue here. Unfortunately, on the top of my head, the most the best funding program I couldn't say. I know that Omidyar, Luminate, the Ford Foundation, and so on, they all support issues like that internationally as well. Also the Open Tech Fund. But the program that I used to run, I'm sorry, this is the doorbell in the background. The program that I used to run, the Prototype Fund, is one of the very few ones that supports individual people or smaller groups working on civic tech or open data projects. And often the names that I just mentioned, they support bigger institutions or NGOs or bigger communities. So I don't know if you're a part of a bigger institution, if you can receive institutional funding, then those might be of help. But for individuals or smaller teams, and that's why we always lobby for the Prototype Fund to have more such funds globally, you need a different kind of funding, like not that much money, not that long, but it's easy to get. And we're lacking this, and this is a problem. And I'm really sorry about that. Maybe in the future we will have more funding opportunities.
Thank you, Adriana. I think you did provide very helpful information. So we have questions from Huang Fu. She wants to use Hung-wen when Taobing website is making use of government's data. If you know from the data that the data is open, but it hasn't authorized the data to the public, will you will you ask the government sectors for authorization of the copyright of the data? And can you please share your experience on when you ask the government for more data and ask the government to authorize the copyright of the data? Thank you.
We haven't encountered copyright issues. If it's a part of the open data set, then it can be used or reused. So I don't think we need to be authorized.
We are a bit run out of time, so I will read the last questions. And I'm really sorry for people whose questions might be neglected by me. But feel free to send an email to me, and I will help to ask the two guests through emails. Yeah. So the last question is from Sky. She wants to ask Hong-wen, when you think about open data, do you think open data can equalize the playing field between large and small companies as customers choose more sustainable options or products?
When we talk about supply chain issues, many clients, originally in the past, they will go for those large players. But actually, a lot of the small and medium enterprises, they have excellent performance. Let me give you an example. Paper making, paper manufacturing, it's actually a highly polluting industry. We have visited a number of factories. You look around the environment, you will have these odd smell, and you can see that the water discharged is also very polluted. And indeed, many of these manufacturing sites, they have these manufacturing process that causes those strange smells. Many of the people who live around paper making plants, they understand this issue. We look at many of the major manufacturers in Taiwan. Indeed, they have many violation records. You look at their violation records, most of them are from the impacted residents who live around the factories. Almost every day, these affected residents will report to the local agency. What I'm trying to say is that for the paper manufacturing factories, it is common that they have these strange smells. In contrast, I have visited this medium, small scale factory, but it does not have this issue at all. The water that it discharges even provides to the neighboring farms. That completely changed my impression of the paper manufacturers. I found this small company, it's not even listed publicly, it's just a small company, but it is able to achieve such high environmental protection standards. And the water that it discharges is able to provide for the farmers. In the past, without the open data, these small companies are hard to be part of the global supply chain. But now, with the open information, we collect all kinds of information from big companies, from local companies. Of course, many of these big companies, they produce ESG report, and the information then comes into our database. But we also want to include as much information as possible so that we can create a better playing field between the large and the small companies. To answer this question, it's positive that it can equalize the playing field.
Thank you, Hong-wen, for answering these questions. I know there are still lots more questions from the audience, but unfortunately, the time is running out. So, well, thank you very much, Adriana. Thank you very much, Hung-wen. Both of you share a lot of with us, and we learn much, much, much from you. So, and also the audience. So, before I end this meeting, I also want to thank our interpreters today, Ms. Grace Huang and Mrs. Serena Lee. You really did a good job. And also thank Rebecca for providing, my colleague, to providing technical support, and Helena to helping operating the WebEx. And thank my head of office, Anna, to help to support this event and brainstorm with me together. Okay, so I will end this event, and I hope to see you in the next episode. So hope you have a great evening. Bye bye.